The Switch 2 was compared to the Steam Deck for Cyberpunk 2077 by Digital Foundry, and everyone seems interested, so let's talk about it. Everybody's been wondering how powerful the Switch 2 is, and there are people thinking that it's as powerful as the PS5, and others saying it's no better than a PS4. And Digital Foundry took one of the games that's available and tried to compare it to something like the Steam Deck to see if the performance was comparable at all. And they've discovered that there is a custom group of settings that are being used on the Switch 2. It falls somewhere in between the PS5 and the PS4. In docked mode, the Switch 2 actually outperformed the Steam Deck. They're both being upscaled, but the Switch 2's DLSS upscaling is custom made and it performs better than the FSR being used on the Steam Deck. The other thing is that Steam Deck is using Linux and they're using a container that's transforming it from Windows to Linux, so it's actually adding an extra layer to everything. And now when compared to handheld mode, the Steam Deck does perform slightly better, especially if they're using no upscaling and just straight 720p, but what makes it really impressive for the Switch 2 is the fact that it's reducing how much power it's taking. Because in order for the Steam Deck to perform well, it needed about 24 watts of power, whereas the Switch was using about 8 watts of power. And the battery consumption is really important because the Steam Deck's battery is about twice the size of what's in the Switch 2, but because the Switch 2 is so efficient, they get about the same battery life, which is really cool. But despite all that, it's not really that impressive because the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck seem to perform about the same for about the same battery cost. And the fact is that the Steam Deck didn't get a custom version, so it's actually a much harder process for it, and it still performed just as well as the Switch 2. That being said, the Switch 2 is really small and it was able to perform quite well. So I guess it's a win and lose? I don't know. What do you think?